Us today. This is Black Women Revolt's Teen Domestic Violence Awareness Month presentation. I am Pam, the Executive Director, and want to say welcome to my group of students that are here with us for our DV Advocate class. I see folks from Third Street Youth, La Casa. I see Asian Women's Shelter. I see USF students. I see Phoenix Project. I see YCD. I'm going to go on and pass it over to Andrea so she can do formal introductions. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea. I'm the operations assistant here at Black Women Revolt Against Domestic Violence, and thank you all so much for coming and joining us in today. Today we're going to have an amazing panel from Asian Women's Shelter, La Casa de las Madres, Project Survive, um, and Black Women Revolt here to talk about Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Um, so without further ado, I want to hand it off to Kayla, our Youth Advisory Council and Black Women Revolt Against Domestic Violence Advisory Board member, to launch us off.
Hi, all. My name is Michaela. I am from USF. I'm a USF student, and I'm really excited to be here and be able to moderate the panel. So thank you for having me, of course. And we're here because February is nationally recognized as Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. And so it's important that we have discussion around this. So why is it so important that we have conversations with middle school, high school, and early college students as they begin to date and kind of form these relationships, not only like, social friend to friend relationships, but also like real like dating relationships because both have a significant impact on their lives. And the fact of the matter is 81% of parents believe that teen dating violence is not an issue or confess that they did not know it was an issue. So again, my name is Michaela, and I'm the youth voice on Black Women Revolt Against Domestic Violence advisory board. I'm only 19, and I go again University of San Francisco. So I just want to say that I am a youth and genuinely find this conversation important, even for myself right now, in real time. So we have some wonderful panelists. Uh, y'all introduce yourself. Let's see. So we're gonna start off with Sophie Reichert, pronouns she, her. If you want to give a little bit about yourself. Really quick.
Oop. Okay, here I am. Hi all. I want to thank Taylor and the folks at Black Women Revolt for hosting this panel and having us today. My name is Sophie. I am the teen advocate with La Casa. Yeah, so happy to be here.
All right. And then we have Angeline Tam, pronouns also she, her. Go ahead and give a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela and I use she, her pronouns. I am from Asian Women's Shelter and I get to run our youth program with our organizations with clients and from the general population. Thank you for having us or having me.
Of course, of course. And then we have Skylar Sussman, pronouns they, he, or they, if you want to give a little about yourself as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Skylar. I'm here representing Project Survive and Expect Respect San Francisco, which are both programs run out of City College San Francisco. And we go around giving presentations through Project Survive to City College classrooms and Expect Respect to SFUSD public high school classrooms about healthy relationships.
Nice. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we have Miss Taylor Stallman. If you wanna
Hi everyone, my name is Taylor. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the Youth DV Prevention Coordinator with Black Revolt Against Domestic Violence. And Kayla is one of our amazing former Youth Advisory Council members, so we are in good hands.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So just to kind of, get this panel going, we're gonna go ahead and start with Love is Respect. The National Youth Domestic Violence Helpline has selected hashtag respect that as the theme for 2025's Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So why is respect so foundational to healthy relationships, and how can teens practice respect not only with partners, but also with friends and family? And I'm going to go ahead and hand that off to Taylor first.
I think respect is so foundational to conversations because if I don't trust that you're respecting what's being said, and this is true with friends, with family, and also who you're dating, I'm probably not going to bother saying it, right? I think a lot of us worry not just about what we have to say, but how it's going to be received. And so I think trusting that I can be upfront with somebody because even if we disagree, that we both have each other's best interests in mind is something that's really important for having conversations with the people who care about you and the people you care about in your life. And I also really want to highlight when working with teens and young adults that it's also important that that respect means that you don't belittle your your high school or middle schoolers or college students' friendships and dating relationships because I think it's one of the reasons that youth don't feel like they can have conversations with their parents is that or the other adults in their life is that they don't perceive the relationships as being like real and meaningful. And if you remember being a high schooler or even a college student, like my friends are my whole world. And the people you're dating are your whole world. And so really treating them with that levity when the young people in your life come to discuss those things. Yeah, because if we don't have respect and I can't trust that you're being honest with me, I'm probably not even going to start the conversation.
That is very real. I know that a lot of people bring things to their parents because of that belittling aspect and feeling like maybe their child isn't mature enough to even be having these relationships. But the fact of the matter is they're not going to be mature enough unless they are, you know, taught something. So next I want to hand it off to Skylar. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. Well, respect is so foundational to our program that we literally named our high school leg Expect Respect. And I would say that respect is the most direct and clear way that we can show care for one another, for each other's time, energy, body, boundaries and values for really everything that we care about and hold dear that matters to us. In our healthy relationship brainstorm, that starts off all of our sessions with both the college and the high school students. We talk about the importance of mutual respect because we never want that respect to be one-sided or for it to be a demand made by one partner to the other. We want that respect to be flowing both ways. And we also talk a lot about the importance of respecting boundaries. That's a big word in our work, and how a very easy way to see if someone will respect you across all other aspects of your life is to test out and set a small boundary, before a date. An anecdote I use is saying, if someone asks you out, you can try saying something along the lines of, I'm really excited to go out with you on Saturday, but I have to be home by 10 to take my dog out. And, if the person responds and says something along the lines of, that sounds great. I'll have you home by 9:45 so you can get some extra snuggles in. That's a green flag. But if they try to push that boundary and say, hey, come on, live a little, it's a Saturday night, then that's a red flag. And so there are all kinds of ways that we can assess people's respect for us early on in the process of getting to know them, and also that we can demonstrate respect in an ongoing way by continuing to respect those boundaries and continuing to show up for them and listen to what really matters to them. And if any issues arise in the relationship, seeing how they deal with that, if that is in a respectful manner, if they're down to have a discussion with you and argue about it in a healthy way so that conflict is generative.
I think you bring up this really great point around boundaries and how that relates to respect. And I really was able to appreciate that because as you were talking, I was thinking like, while having boundaries really is it's a really big part of coming into your own person and understanding what you like and what makes you you. And that starts off at the want for respect for something. So you create boundaries off of what might bother you or what doesn't, what you yearn for as far as respect goes, and also giving that. So um, yeah, I think it's great. Um, okay, so all of the healthy relationships promotion programs that are with us today work with San Francisco Unified School District. So what I want to know is what grades you work with and what kind of response you're getting from students in the classroom. And I want to start this off with Miss Sophie.
All right, thank you, Kayla. So at La Casa, and for folks that are unfamiliar, our main office, our drop-in center is located in Soma, but obviously we work with all folks within the SFUSD district. So our teen program focuses on and supports ages folks 12 through 24. In regard to our preventative aspects and educational presentations, we do work with middle schools, high schools, as well as college-age folks. So our services are free. We're available for all ages, all age ranges. But in regard to direct services, so things like one-on-one peer counseling and support groups, we are solely focused on building our relationship with our SFUSD high schools. Those client ages generally range from 14 through 19, and that's just because of our existing MOU. Kayla, did you
Nice.
want me to also respond to that second half, or should I circle back once folks kind of introduced it?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of follow up with what kind of responses are you getting in the classroom, of course.
Yeah,
Please.
totally. So in regard to provider feedback, when I say provider, I'm talking like teachers, all kind of school staff, things like that. We've been met with a lot of overwhelming positive support. We kind of want to shout out any of the folks that are in the room that work in those schools and just general providers for their trust and enthusiasm and having us back in those wellness centers this year. As many providers have kind of expressed to us, I know generationally, they may have not received that education as I hope that it's becoming more normalized now. And so many of the youth also have kind of echoed the same. In regard to feedback during our educational presentations, we kind of have found the most pushback or like mixed messaging in regard to our red flag curriculum. So kind of around technological abuse and technological safety, kind of similar to I think what Skylar had mentioned before. We often will ask youth to identify and kind of teach them or work with them to kind of understand what behaviors fall into the categories of unhealthy red flag or healthy and green flag. And then obviously those examples that may be a little bit more flexible or what we consider a yellow flag or a warning sign. And so kind of I know we'll talk about this later on, but as we all navigate new technology and social media, we kind of want to emphasize and highlight our emphasis on like safety, harm reductions, as we understand and know that most youth will have phones and will continue to use them. But that's just a little bit about kind of the feedback that we've been getting as we touch on certain issues in the kind of broader realm of teen dating violence.
Right, yeah. I'm noticing this red flag, green flag activity and more so naming is becoming a very almost positive thing because I think a lot of this is understanding what's good and what's not good essentially. So to have the red flag, green flag, I'm just noticing that's a very common one for people, and it's very common for younger people to kind of stick to that and apply it. So I want to push it over to Miss Taylor.
So Black Revolt Against Domestic Violence, similar to Casa de las Madres, services youth that are 12 to 24 in that prevention aspect. So we are open for SFUSD's middle schools, high schools, and colleges, but also keep a focus on community spaces. We are located in Bayview. We know that a lot of youth would prefer to receive their education in a community hub. And in terms of reception in the classroom, most of our presentations focus on healthy relationships or digital boundaries. I will say we were just in schools for Love Fest, which is on Valentine's Day, where I think a lot of people do prevention education, get requests to come into the classroom. Shout out that we do exist all other 364 days of the year, and you can call us those days as well. I feel like one of the big things I love seeing from teachers is when they invite us in because it's a program they or their friends needed, right? And I think a lot of youth turn to friends in times of crisis with their dating relationships or their situationships. And so having a friend that sort of knows what number to call or where they can get help or where they can talk about healthy relationships can be really helpful. So I really appreciate the teachers who invited us in because they wanted that resource. And then the other thing I tend to see in classrooms is just challenging that unhealthy relationships or abusive relationships aren't always physical. So you'll notice a lot of us are also mentioning digital boundaries, behaviors that would qualify as stalking, right? Things that are financially not respectful of your partner, things that might push your partner's sexual boundaries or might be reproductive coercion, right? These are all behaviors that I think we have more trouble naming in the classroom. And then the other thing I sometimes see is, well, is it that bad if a girl does it, particularly from the young men that I work with? And I think just naming that whether you're in a straight relationship or you're in an LGBT relationship, and whether or not, you know, whichever end it is on, the behavior is really unacceptable.
I think that is important. Yes. Highlighting the double standard and working with that. And I am so sorry. I would love to get to Angela as well. I have not heard from her, and we would like to hear from you as well. I didn't see you on my screen.
No worries. I was gonna hop in if you missed me anyways. Yeah, so I'm Angela and I work for Asian Women's Shelter. So for me, I work with 12 to 18 or 19 years old, definitely from like middle school to high school. What I do is I get to work with how do I explain this? So, Asian Women's Shelter is a DV organization in SF, and so our location tends to be confidential. So, one population that I get to work with are youth of our clientele that we work with, and so we do have support group for folks who have youth that may have experienced violence or yeah, they probably have experienced violence because they've already come to Asian Women's Shelter for support, their caregivers or their parents. So that's one group that I run. Another group that I run is leadership, which is similar to what Michaela is in. But that is specifically for high school students. So those are, they can be clients from our youth that are in Asian Women's Shelter. It could also be general population as well. So that's where we kind of tap into this SFUSD to kind of get youth involved to learning about healthy and unhealthy relationship and leadership when it comes to talking to their peers about these topics. So those two is what I get to do. And then I also do presentations in SFUSD. Some of it comes from wellness centers. Others, what Taylor said is that we have champions, what I like to call champions at SFUSD. So these are teachers that are not associated with the wellness center. So I do have teachers that are coming to me that are biology teachers to be like, hey, can you come talk about this topic with my students about, you know, gender stereotypes, peer pressure, and all those other topics. So I get to go into schools, mostly high schools, to talk about that with youth. What I'm seeing from classrooms, I like to focus more on what youth are kind of telling me because I like to ask questions at the end to be like, what questions do you still have? Something that I noticed when we talk about self-esteem, right, which is super important. Skylar mentioned that, I think, a little bit earlier, right? So some questions that youth ask me about self-esteem is like, how does self-esteem relate to dating, right? And I think that's such an important like question or like a red flag for me to be like, if they're not understanding how self-esteem is affecting their dating life or their relationships, that is a really big concern for me that we need to have more conversations in the classroom. We need to have more conversations in our community about how important self-esteem is tied to violence, right? And tied to being stuck in a relationship when you aren't feeling, you know, happy in that relationship. So and yeah, I'll stop there because I have so much responses that I'll save for later.
No, yeah. I would actually love to hear more. Kind of my next question was, because you touched on or something that came to mind to me while you were talking was this question of kind of like how much should I tolerate kind of your self-esteem being tied to like how much I take in a relationship and things like that. One of the best questions at Black Women Revolt, or that Black Women Revolt has received from a student over the course of classroom presentations is, are relationships supposed to be stressful? I kind of going back to what I was thinking of, how much should I tolerate? You know, is it supposed to be like this? So, um, if you'd like to give some insight on how you would respond to that, what that kind of looks like for you.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about this answer in my head, I was like, no, they're not supposed to be stressful, right? By nature, no, right? But I think the other important thing is that their stress is normal in life, right? Like it's not like life is not a stress-free thing, right? And so when we think about stress, right, I think about disagreements that Skylar had said a little bit earlier, right? Just like disagreements, arguments are normal, right? And when you think about relationships, right? Dating relationships, it's two people coming together, two people that have may have different backgrounds, may have similar backgrounds, may have been raised, differently or the same. And so when you're bringing two people together, yeah, it could be stressful because maybe when I wash dishes, I like to wash them all in one in time, but my partner might like to keep that dishes in the sink until the end of the day, right? And so it's two people coming together. And so, yeah, that might be stressful. You might have to like talk that out. And when you are able to get over that hump, right, that brings your relationship so much closer. Um, and so that's kind of what I think about when you're in a healthy relationship. It's kind of normal. You can, not normal, but you can get through those tough conversations, right? And so when it's like unhealthy, it's like you're walking on eggshells. You don't feel comfortable around them, right? You feel like you have to like put face around them and just can't be yourself, right? Like, and then I think the biggest one for me is like dismissive, what Taylor said earlier, right? Or Michaela said earlier, when someone's dismissing, oh, like you're too young to be in a relationship, you don't know what love is, right? You can feel that same thing with a partner, right? When someone says like, oh, um, I don't know if I would think that way, or kind of being like, like, well, whatever, right? And so these are like some things that I kind of think about when we think about relationships and like what's stressful versus like not stressful.
I couldn't agree more. Um, so I'm gonna pass it over to Miss Sophie. Are relationships supposed to be stressful? How do you respond to this question?
Angela, I think you hit some really, really fantastic points. So I want to kind of echo everything else that was said, right? When we're thinking about red flags, boundaries, kind of everything that has been brought up so far. And I think a lot of young folks and like adult clients that I've interacted with kind of both may find themselves asking this question, and kind of differentiating like stress and kind of this unhealthy idea of intensity. Like that's one thing that we always emphasize as a red flag is really, really intense beginnings, really intense relationships. We recognize again, I really appreciate that all the folks have been bringing up autonomy of youth, right? We want to kind of emphasize that, youth have autonomy, they have these relationships, you don't want to belittle them. And there is passion, right? But if it's unhealthy intensity, that's causing all the anxiety and all the stress. That's where we kind of want to backpedal and kind of think about our boundaries and if it's time to exit those relationships. I also want to emphasize kind of what Taylor was saying earlier about challenging the notion of toxic relationships and that it's not always physical. I think that can be really hard, especially young folks, college age folks, kind of like what are the other examples of what stressful behavior and things can look like. And I also recognize that a lot of young folks are kind of navigating their first relationships, and we may not be equipped to kind of recognize and understand with different information, like what is healthy and what is unhealthy. But again, kind of what Angela was saying, in a perfect world, right? Things shouldn't be stressful, but we also recognize that we're all human. Stressors happen, stressors accumulate. I know with a lot of different things in the world right now, with school, things are stressful. But we want to emphasize that relationships to try to fill up your metaphorical emotional bucket and not detract from it and not detract from other aspects of your life. Thank you.
I think you touched and expanded on these points quite well. As we talk about what's healthy, what's unhealthy, and how to navigate these kind of situations, I think it's important to start with what are some early warning signs or red flags in an unhealthy relationship, and how can teens recognize them before they escalate? Sophie, I'm just going to go ahead and continue with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I want to again emphasize on the call. I really appreciate with the youth and with the providers kind of how great that we've kind of normalized this idea of like red flags as a term. When we work with youth in regards to kind of understanding early warning signs, red flags, we usually try to empower them in regard to our one-on-one client work as well as our presentations, utilizing the power and control wheel. For folks that are on the call that may be unfamiliar with it, I find it's a really great visual resource, especially as a lot of youth may grapple with, is this relationship unhealthy if it's not physical abuse, right? There's so many other different kinds. And this wheel kind of demonstrates how those forms of abuse are often interconnected, as well as highlighting kind of forms of abuse that may be unfamiliar to some, like intense possessiveness, intense jealousy, as again, many kind of consider abuse to only fall into the categories of emotional, physical, and sexual. We got this question a lot on Friday, right? Like, how do I know if this relationship's unhealthy? What is a red flag? And we want to recognize it can be really, really difficult to identify that. One biggest thing that I have been seeing is just extreme jealousy, kind of resulting in either that isolation of that person from their support system, as well as a variety of other things. I feel like cyber has been a big theme for a lot of the providers in the room. So if a partner is monitoring your social media, monitoring your friend group, I've been seeing a lot of monitoring maybe how that partner is dressing and making comments about that. And we also recognize that it can be easy to romanticize that behavior. It can be good to feel wanted or chosen, or we may think, again, that's healthy, that this is my person, maybe perceiving them as compliments. But we want to emphasize also if a partner is controlling how you're dressing, controlling your self-expression, your gender expression, criticizing you for hanging out with friends that may be the same gender that you're attracted to, we would consider this an unhealthy behavior. Kind of going back to the previous questions, again, extreme intensity. We recognize there's nuance, but if a partner's love bombing you, another kind of great term, I feel like that's been normalized on social media. So maybe buying extravagant gifts, declarations of love, things like that. These are just things to look out for kind of early on and emphasizing that it's really okay and great to take things slow and kind of think, I always think of boundaries and knowledge as power, and that privacy and autonomy are kind of that same, right? Privacy is power and important. And that your you time along with friend time is also it's all equally important in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, kind of overall, just again, recognizing that it's hard to see these behaviors as they're occurring, and that we may be in these unhealthy relationships and still love that person. Things are complicated, but encouraging youth and teens to kind of actively think about their boundaries and what's working for them, and what's working for them in their relationships. Kind of checking in on those boundaries periodically. I think Skylar did a great job of kind of introducing that and speaking to that. But just periodically checking in, writing these things down, making a relationship checklist of what works for you, because we understand relationships look differently for everyone, but obviously abuse is not part of healthy relationships.
Yes, I like this. Skylar, I would like to push it over to you as well.
Thank you. So in our healthy relationship brainstorm, one of the core tenets that we present about is the importance of healthy arguments, which I know other people have touched on already. And I'm so glad that there's that cohesion across the board, because they are such a not only healthy but important part of relationships. And we teach that there are three aspects to those healthy arguments, that they are non-violent, non-abusive, and non-frequent. We differentiate between violence and abuse by explaining that in this realm, violence is something that someone does with their body to directly harm someone or to threaten or intimidate them. So that could be directly pushing or kicking them, or that could be throwing their journal across the room or using their body to block a doorway or punching the wall. And then with abuse, of course, it can take many other forms, as other people mentioned, that are non-physical. And also we see that abuse happens in a pattern. And then finally, for frequency, we say that, we cannot say what is or is not too frequent for your relationship. Every relationship is different. And if we see that partners are returning continually to the same issue and never reaching a resolution, never doing the work to meet one another and move past the issue, then that is too frequent. So we say all the things that a healthy argument should not be, but what we say that it should be or should have is safety, mutual accountability, and commitment to change. And if at any point a partner stops feeling safe, either in an argument or in a relationship as a whole, then we say that is a massive red flag, that you should always be feeling that safety. And finally, I want to say that when we mention commitment to change, we want to make sure that that, like respect, as I mentioned, is not one-sided. We never want someone to be pressuring another partner to change, especially change too much about themselves or change their core values. Because once you cross that line, that becomes coercive and controlling. And that's a sign that that is not the right person for you. And because we teach about the importance of having a sense of self, a strong one when you enter a relationship, we encourage students to hold on to that sense of self and recognize when someone is trying to change that or take that away from you. And yeah, there is just so much to say about this. But I can stop there.
Of course, there is a whole lot to unpack, and I think you touched on some really great things. And one of the overarching themes that I'm seeing here is kind of like uh, most of the red flags that we see early on in a relationship are from communication or stem from, some type of communication. And now you're seeing like, oh, maybe it's this thing. Sometimes it can be, the more maybe simpler or easy to get around things such as like, the dish situation and like stuff like that where but even then, once you sit down and you have that talk, that's when you kind of see where this person is mentally and where you are and where you guys can, yeah, either kind of go together or maybe even grow apart if that's the case. However, getting back to the other point, with communication, one of the biggest ways that my generation communicates is technology. So I want to go ahead and ask Angela, how do you see technology such as, social media, texting, and how does it shape the dynamics of teen relationships, both positively and negatively?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. That's definitely something that, me, Taylor, and Sophie talk about all the time when it comes to digital boundaries, and just technology. So I think for the positives, it's definitely like with folks with being connected, right? I think the internet has been a plenty of resource of accessing, information that we didn't have access to many years ago, right? If you have any relationship questions, right? One place I love to go to is, Love is Respect or One Love to get information on how do we talk to teens about X, Y, and Z, right? So I think technology is a really great way for youth and for other folks to get information on how to navigate relationships, right? And then being connected in a way of, if you are in a long distance relationship with someone, right? Video calling, phone call, text is a really great way to kind of see what the other person's up to. So that's the only two that I can really think that is positive, but I feel free other people add on. But then when I think about like the negative impacts that it has on relationship, I think the number one thing that comes to my mind that a lot of people think about is the comparison, right? When we are seeing people on Instagram, Valentine's Day came up, right? And for a lot of people, it brings certain feelings up when you don't have a partner, right? And when you're seeing a lot of people having partners and being showered with gifts and like flowers and all of that. And so it's kind of hard because then you see folks who are posting about that. You see celebrities posting about their relationship. So you're kind of comparing to be like, hey, I've been in a relationship with this person. And like, how does that compare to, a celebrity? My favorite, for me, it's like Zendaya and Tom Holland, right? Like you don't mean to like compare yourself with celebrity couples, but sometimes you're like, oh, like, like how old are they? Like what are they doing? Are they engaged, right? Millie Bobby Brown, right? And thinking about where you are in comparison with them or with your friends, right? Or with your loved ones even, right? For folks who are like, I've been married for 37 years, and you're like, oh, then like how old did they get married? And like, that aspect of comparing. I think the other really big one is stalking, right? Stalking, cyberbullying, harassment is definitely at its high when it comes to technology, right? When you're getting consistent calls or text messages from your partner or someone that you don't want to have contact, a previous partner, right? And cyberbullying is probably, it's today's version of bullying in person, which still happens. So those are some of the negative things that I think about when it comes to technology and when it comes to, being in a relationship and changing the dynamics of relationships.
I think everything you touched on is very real. And I just want to go ahead and throw in there right quick. Guys, on Valentine's Day, I was one of those people that was online and I was like, oh my gosh, everybody in the relationship was online. So I went to the gym. I went to the gym and I highly encourage if you see anything online that really makes you sad, just go to the gym or do something that like really makes you happy because that's the best thing that you can do. And you know what? We got past Valentine's Day and I am okay. So, Taylor, I want to go ahead and pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think just to echo what Angelin said about seeing other people online and that comparison, I think that's where we see some of the young people we work with feel like pressured to provide really expensive gifts for their partner, or feel like because their partner gave them a really big, expensive public gift, that they can't tell their friends, that they're actually like worried about how they communicate or don't always feel their partner's respectful. For positives, I think just learning your communication style. So one of the questions we talked about in the classroom on Friday doing presentations was, your partner sends you a good morning text every morning. And for a lot of people were like, that's a green flag. I love it. Send me the morning selfie. Like, I want to talk to you when I'm getting ready. And other people were like, I am not a morning person. You can't make me a morning person. Please do not expect me to text or call you before 9 a.m. It's not happening. So really knowing yourself and being able to communicate that. I think Kayla's heard me say it before, but especially when you're getting to know somebody, if that's college freshman orientation, if it's because you're talking to someone and you're texting and it's 10 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., that I would really encourage you to put down the phone, because I think we share information with people we're getting to know when we're sleepy, or also I do want to not out there intoxicated, right? Because some of our youth do drink or use other substances. I think you're more likely to share stuff that you probably would not have shared in the light of day. And when you don't know somebody, sometimes they're not someone you want to trust with that personal information about you. The other thing that I tend to think of in terms of social media and texting is just that relentlessness. Like when we're talking about not being able to get away from someone who's an ex, or someone that you just don't feel fills up your cup, right? That if you haven't taken that motion to mute somebody, right? Or block somebody online, and those are two different things, or you just don't feel like you can make a choice about whether or not you want to have a social media presence, or you don't get to make that choice because someone's used social media against you in a way that's not positive. I just feel like that incessant contact. And I think most of us have worked with a youth who've received back-to-back calls from their partner because they haven't picked up, or they get anxious because their partner doesn't respond in 2 minutes. I just think it really sets both youth up for disappointment, and can also make for some really scary situations where folks don't feel safe even when they have physical distance from the other person. And I do also really want to plug that sometimes we work with youth who do have digital images that are of a sexual nature online. Granted, everyone under 18 theoretically would never have images that are sexual or sexy online, but we know it does happen. And so I do want to also nod that sometimes we work with youth in those situations, and having that trust broken that they shared that intimate photo with somebody, and it made the rounds at school, or they shared it to somebody else, or someone's threatened to tell their folks that they are sexually active is a really horrifying experience to go through as a young person, and that's an area we might spread support. And I will drop the link to Take It Down, which is a national resource for youth in that situation.
Which is highly encouraged to use if you do need it. I am seeing in the chat that Katrina has said, I am also thinking that teen relationships are so critical because they often establish the norm or expectations for what relationships should be because they've likely never seen them, it's likely never been in them before. And that is important because especially when it comes to like the influence of famous people and whatnot, like and how their relationships are being handled, how men specifically decide to, have, this X amount or not of women, and how women decide to maybe or not do the same, how those things are taken and applied then into the way that young people decide to have relationships and run their relationships. And yeah, so I just thought that was interesting to touch on. I didn't want to let it go. Um, so moving on, if a teen suspects that their friend is in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, what are some ways that they can approach the situation to offer support? How can they ensure that the friend feels safe and respected and supported, but while also being able to take care of themselves? And so I'm going to start with Sophie.
Thank you. This is a really great question. I think this is something that's been coming up a lot, especially after our educational presentations. We have like a little chunk or section that talks about peer support. And so I think a lot of folks are coming forward and asking like, hey, I've seen friends in the situation. How do I support them? And it can be really difficult, right? We want to emphasize the importance of like not feeling responsible or kind of saving, becoming too involved in that peers relationship, especially if it may even escalate into a safety risk for that person. But we also recognize it can be really emotional to watch a friend kind of enter into that unhealthy relationship or watch them go through that cycle of violence, kind of that off and on situation. So when we have conversations with folks, we encourage youth to kind of center their friends. I know it can be really easy to center that abusive partner, their negative actions, the unhealthy behaviors, but in reality, that might cause that person to become defensive, right? Because oftentimes in abusive relationships and unhealthy relationships, there is still love. So it can be difficult to have those conversations if you're making negative points on the partner, if that makes sense. So simple supportive messaging is key. I think really asking questions that center that survivor and their experiences. So I miss you. How are you doing? How can I support you? Kind of giving that autonomy back to them in that conversation that y'all are having. And then also just taking space, right? Sometimes we need to take a step back from those friendships. The providers in the room are all here to kind of help and assist those youth in the ways that we can. Obviously, again, without removing the autonomy from that person. And we want to make sure that the youth in SF and around the city kind of know that they can and should lean on these providers here for support in the ways that we can. And then kind of the general theme, kind of what was kind of going on in the chat as well. We want to encourage these youth to have conversations with their peers about what healthy relationships look like. I really think that normalizing these conversations, often uncomfortable conversations, and kind of developing these support systems can really prevent unhealthy relationships because, it's hard to understand what is normal, right? There isn't really a normal. And we may also normalize these unhealthy behaviors because it's all we know, it's all we've experienced, or even it's what we've seen at home. And also, again, acknowledging that shame can be something that can be powerful in regard to silencing survivors. But when we think about, again, the broad scheme of teen dating violence, 1 in 3 folks are experiencing unhealthy relationships. That size is probably higher. You are not alone, and it's important to lean on folks for support and have these conversations around, again, what healthy relationships look like and what relationships we all deserve.
Definitely a lot of things being touched on there. Thank you, Ms. Sophie. I want to pass it over to Taylor.
I just want to echo what Sophie said earlier, is that one of the challenges that we really see with work is that sometimes youth are learning these behaviors from like social media or friends, but also that youth may be in a position where they're only just starting to imagine the relationship they want for themselves. And some of the youth we work with are realizing that that means they want to create a relationship that's different than the one they see modeled at home, right? So I want to hold a lot of grace for that in our work. But in terms of supporting a friend, I think also noting that focusing on behaviors, right, and not on the person. I feel like if you go to your friend and you're like, I really hate so and so, right? That can be excessively frustrating. And instead saying like, hey, I noticed the other day when you said you wanted to go with us, instead of, having you make that decision, knowing that you were going to come hang out with us after school, your partner grabbed your arm anyway and had you come with them. Like, does that happen a lot? Like, how does that make you feel? Just really taking that opportunity to name the behavior and focus on like how that shows up and impacts your friend instead of naming the person, because I think that falsely creates an us against them, right? And whether or not you're friends with both of them, I really do want to highlight that all of us believe that working with youth, that you have the capacity to change, right? That doesn't mean that the young person has to stay around and continue dating the other person while they make their change. You can wish them good things from afar. Um, and then with taking care of a friend, I want to say that we often find out that young people are in situations that are challenging in terms of dating situations because their friend is providing support and gets stressed. And that their friend is sometimes the person that we have contact with. And so just naming for friends that if they feel comfortable getting assistance in their school, that wellness is there, but that also confidential resources are available to youth. So for friends, again, plugging that one love or love is respect, that they can look for language there and say, hey, I read this article, or I'm follow this social media account. Can we watch it together, right? Being able to call and say, well, I see that you're really struggling and I heard about this love is respect number in my wellness class, and maybe we can call it together, right? And someone has the capacity to stay on the line. So just really setting youth up in a position where they're there as a friend and support and not there as an expert, because ultimately we don't want them feeling responsible for their friend's safety. And unfortunately, even with teenagers, sometimes that safety does need to be a consideration when planning on exiting a relationship or evaluating how safe it is. I also want to name that sometimes youth are friends with the person causing the harm. So one of the resources we have in California is called A Call for Change. It's with an Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. So 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Youth or the person who loves the person doing the harm and adults can actually call, and it's a de-escalation hotline. So if you have questions about why they behave that way, maybe you notice yourself getting worked up, and instead of taking it on the person you're dating, you need to get space or take a walk around the block. You're able to call and walk through that thought process with someone, which I think is really valuable because a lot of the times our hotlines are triaging of like, do you need emergency assistance now? And especially when young people are learning and growing, it can be really helpful to be able to know that the other person on the end of the line can talk to you for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, to really sort of work you through how you can change how you show up for the people in your relationships and really be your best possible self.
Perfect. I think we answered a lot of or we've had a lot of talk of um relationships, of course. And I want to bring it back to the organizations that we have with us today and kind of ask the question, um, how is your organization centering youth advocacy, awareness, and empowerment for survivors of teen dating violence, and IPV in the changing of the political landscape? And I want to start with Angela. Let me know if you want me to repeat the question again. I'm sorry, I was internalizing it as I was thinking
No
notes. So
worries.
let me know.
I just want to make sure, I know you said IPV, but for folks who don't know what IPV is intimate partner violence. I just wanted to clarify that before jumping in.
Thank
So
you for the
yeah,
clarification.
huh? Sorry.
I say thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, so how is Asian Women's Shelter centering youth advocacy, awareness, and empowerment? So me and Taylor have been working closely, doing a resolution for the San Francisco city. We've been working with the SF Youth Commission to really uplift youth voices when it comes to Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And so me, Taylor, and the SF Youth Commission was able to pass a resolution to recognize Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month in the city of San Francisco for the second time this year. So we got to do that, and that was really cool to kind of just experience what that looked like on a government level of how do you get policies and people to recognize that this is an issue, and how do you spread that awareness to other folks?
Sorry, trying to find that unmute button. Okay, and then I want to push it over. Thank you, thank you. And I want to push it over to Skylar.
So our program offers 2 classes through CCSF taught by Professor Adele Fales-Carpenter, who's on this call. The first one is Women's and Gender Studies 54, The Politics of Sexual Violence, which examines the political and social and psychological causes of sexual violence, connects it to other forms of violence, and provides strategies for addressing the social problems of sexual violence and transforming your rape culture, including prevention education and the healing function of writing, and has students do a field project as well. And then the other class is Women and Gender Studies 55, Ending Sexual Violence Peer Education, which provides students with education and skills training in peer education to promote healthy relationships and reduce sexual violence, especially intimate partner violence and acquaintance rape. And in order to do that, peer educators prepare a facilitation plan, and they conduct campus-wide visibility projects and conduct presentations to City College classrooms and do volunteer work in community-based organizations, which also involves a field project. And so high school students can take those classes at Ocean campus and receive high school and college credit while attending for free. And both classes are taught after high school hours, either in the fall or the spring, so that it can fit within a high school student schedule and their student activities. In addition to that, we also have a dual enrollment program at Mission High that is taught entirely to high school students, and that trains them to do sexual violence prevention at Mission High School by taking those classes that I mentioned, and also outreach at Mission High School. And so this is education that happens at their own school site. And, most of them can't leave Mission High School for extended periods, but they have, in some instances, presented to the health teachers for the district, though it is mostly school site leadership. So we definitely like to get the word out about those opportunities and programs. We plug them at the end of our presentations and have a sign-up sheet so students can learn more about them and get connected with the work. And if they do take the class at Ocean Campus, the Ending Sexual Violence Peer Education, that does train them themselves to become peer educators, which is the work that I do and I'm honored to do with so many other amazing peer educators in our program. So there's a real commitment to the peer education model of bringing in the younger students so that they can speak directly to their peers, because it is so different for these messages to come, from a more top-down approach, from maybe other people who are further away from their life experience, either generationally or demographically. And so it really matters to us to have Spanish-speaking educators in classes with Spanish-speaking students, and to have the proper materials for that, and to have Chinese language materials as well for students for whom those would be helpful. And it definitely matters to us to be as much as possible on the level of the students with which we're working, and to emphasize at the beginning of our sessions, we're here to learn from you just as much as you're here to learn from us, because we all learn from each other how to keep one another safe. And it's by doing this work and bringing in new educators and new leaders in the sexual violence prevention movement that we fight a rape culture and instead replace it with a consent culture. Because doing this work as an educator empowers you so much in your own personal life to be an active bystander, to call in your friends when you recognize that they may be developing, abusive habits or patterns, to also recognize and notice in your own life if those patterns may be emerging in your own relationship. It really gives you such a personal stake in the work and empowers you to speak out when necessary.
Great. I think you plugged a lot of important information in there, and we appreciate you for all of it. I want to kind of circle back as we kind of, get ready to head out and stuff today. I want to emphasize that teens, some teens currently experience things like this, and I want to know what they can do, um, more so on the immediate side, or even to prevent um, prevent domestic violence, and how they can stay safer. So how can Love is Respect advise a teen of their options, which again is that outline that we kind of plugged earlier. Oh, and I want to ask Taylor. Sorry.
Yeah. So Love is Respect is the national youth version of the domestic violence hotline. They have a 24-hour number for teens and young adults and the folks who support them to ask questions about their relationships, including how to navigate a conflict or whether their relationship is safe. So you can visit that loveisrespect.org that will drop. But the really cool thing they have is you can text Love Is to 22522, as well as their national number, which will drop below. But I think all of us start to have conversations about breakups where you do your boundaries, versus whether or not you need a breakup plan versus a safety plan, right? And if you're noticing any of the behaviors that we spoke about today in terms of yellow flags or red flags, if you notice a lot of those popped up, whether it's as you're thinking about ending a relationship or if they pop up after a relationship, it would be a great time for you to get in contact with Love is Respect, or us, or CASA, or Asian Women's Shelter, and talk about if you need help staying safe, right? How we can do that for you. But first and foremost, it's always going to be advising somebody that you are having a breakup, having that breakup in a public place, and examining, although we'd all like to be respectful and have that breakup one-on-one, face-to-face, that if it really is a safety concern and you've reached out to us or Love is Respect and they've decided it might not be safe for you to have that breakup in person, that we might examine other ways that you can do that, including gathering documents that you need, and finding out ways not to run into that person at your school or at your work.
Perfect. I do know some people have to jump off. Bear with me, y'all. I got one more question for you. And I'm just wondering how, like, someone like me, a youth, can stay involved in these programs and organizations. So, I'm going to start with Miss Angela.
Yeah, I think just reaching out to either all of us or one of us and getting connected with resources is definitely something that folks and youth could get connected and start doing the work and just having conversations.
Okay, so if I'm a just a person frolicking in San Francisco and I want to get involved, but I just kind of go to your website and then get contact information, email from there.
Yeah, so that's probably the best place. You can email our info email, which actually Sarah is here that answers our emails, and she'll direct you towards me. Or reach out to anyone if you ever see anyone at Asian Women's Shelter. I've had colleagues who met youth to be like, hey, do you know that we have a youth program? And like gave them grab their contact information. And I reached out. So there's many ways of finding me.
Perfect, thank you. And then Skylar, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Yeah, I'll just name that if anyone wants to find out more information on our curriculum or the handouts we use in our presentations and supplementary handouts as well, and how to get in contact with our program coordinator, Adele, you can visit tinyurl.com/PS resource, which I am dropping in the chat. And yeah, I just really encourage people to tell young people in their lives that they can become trained to become peer educators and that it is incredibly meaningful and fulfilling and necessary work. And we just want to build a strong and thriving and supportive network of peer educators to change the culture that we live in.
Thank you, thank you. And then, Ms. Taylor.
If you're getting in contact with us, if you found Crucial Conversations, you've already found us. But we also have our regular website if you want to go through for a presentation, or you can follow either of our Instagram accounts. The youth one is at Black Women Revolt, BWRDV_youth. So for all of us, if we're doing a presentation that's open to the public, you might find it there. As well as our Youth Advisory Council is open to folks who are 16 to 24. And that information will always be on socials because that's where young people are at. But just really appreciating that everyone deserves to have a healthy relationship. And we all really believe that. And that's why we do the work. So, Sophie, if you want to take it off from here.
Thank you all. I just dropped our contact information in the chat. This is also accessible on our website, but I will keep it brief. I know we're a little over time. But in regard to kind of working with us, unfortunately, and a lot of folks in the room may echo this, but due to our confidentiality policy, just for client safety, we can only host volunteers who are 18 plus at our office. I know that some high schoolers are on the cusp, as well as folks that are college aged. You're welcome to kind of fill out that application on our website. They look like direct service opportunities. So that would be helping out on our hotline, doing more direct service, direct client work, as well as indirect work for folks that don't feel comfortable with direct work. So that'd be like marketing, graphic design, things like that. We also welcome any and all donations. We recently had a middle school that made some really beautiful hygiene kits that our youth really loved during Love Fest and Valentine's Day week. So for folks that maybe are too young to get involved with the direct volunteer stuff, again, welcome any sort of donations or things that you want to work with us for. That can look like hygiene kits, welcome cards for the clients that do utilize our shelter, and things of that nature. And kind of echoing what other folks said, youth can request presentations, right? So we get a lot of requests and feedback from adult providers, but we've also gotten folks that have advocated for us to join them at club presentations during lunch, as well as tabling events, things like that. And all of our educational resources and presentations are free of charge. I want to emphasize that teen line. I know folks may not identify with the word teen. We have two lines that run 24/7. They'll both be answered by a live person. We also have that text line. We may direct folks on that text line to call. That's just for privacy reasons, confidentiality. But again, all of those run 24/7. We're here to support and help out. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for having us. I really appreciate it.
I really want to thank you guys for, being on the panel, sharing your thoughts, sharing your resources. It is very needed. So I want to go ahead and open up for questions. And the question, y'all so quiet. Okay. All right. So then I want to say thank you for coming on, and lastly, just talk about this hotline because it is very important. So Love Respect hosts a national 24/7 hotline for teens and young adults who might have questions about their relationships, including how to navigate conflict or whether the relationship is even safe. So even general questions are open here. To learn more, you can visit loveisrespect.org or text love is to 22522. I can put that in the chat if needed. Otherwise, thank you guys so much.
And shout out to Michaela for stepping in and moderating this panel. We miss having her in the office on a regular basis here, but she is on our adult advisory board as our youth member, and we absolutely love and adore her. Thank you, Angeline and Sophie, as well as Skylar. We appreciate your time and being here today.